Blades of Khorne list building. All the updates, all the erratas, all the fun. Let's go! Blades of Khorne revolve around Blood Tithe. Unlocking new abilities with points earned when any unit is destroyed, friend or foe. This ability looks like an invitation to play slowly and unlock its powers step by step across the game. But that's a misconception. Blood Tithe absolutely warps the pacing of our strategy and playstyles, yet it doesn't push its impact toward the late game. Instead, it pulls a massive amount of attention towards the beginning of the game. But there is a twist. The normal peak of the game is in Battle Round 2. With Khorne, we want to have some killing in the very first battle round, then a few interactions in the second and have the game peak at Battle Round 3 or even 4. We start with an overview to get a good grasp on what we are actually talking. Let's have a look at the internal stats. A quick evaluation on what aspects of the game Blades of Khorne can lean into to win. Melee damage sits at 8 out of 10. As pure melee force, the entire game plan is based around chopping off the enemy heads in close combat. But it's not a pure brute force army, like ogres or some Slaves to Darkness builds. Range damage, a flat 0 out of 10. We will never consider any ranged output as more than a nice to have. Durability lands at 6 out of 10. Our plan is never to outlast the enemy, but we can absolutely build into a more durable force, especially when certain units are combined. Arcana, prayers, spells or spell defense ends up at 6 out of 10. Going hardcore prayer heavy is a real path to victory, but it needs a dedicated build around it. Our defense against real spells is very low, but our defense against manifestations is high. Mobility, 5 out of 10. Outrunning the enemy is not really possible. There are some mobility buffs and a few fast exceptions, but mobility is not a game plan. It's a necessity for Blades of Khorne. Now we cover the battle traits and take a closer look at our playstyles and where and when to focus our attention. We have two battle traits. First is our Berserk mode ability, Blood Drenched. And since we can also chant this buff onto our units, we should understand the main takeaway. Non-demons, also known as Bloodbound, get the highest damage bonus. Demons get a lower bonus. Still a good one, but not as steep as crit mortals. And since we're on the topic, calling this Super Saiyan transformation totally misses the point. The first Super Saiyan transformation is a 50-fold increase and the later ones at least double their strength. Of course, this is not related to any strategy, but it's a very important point to me. The Blood Drenched ability has received an update, a good one. While the effect itself didn't change for the units, the way how they acquire the buff did. We now unlock the buff for a single unit with each Blood Tithe skill we unlock. It is self-explanatory. Choose a unit that goes offensive to be more damagey. The twist? We now have a reason to unlock cheaper Blood Tithe abilities to grant the damage buff to a unit. Yes, we can unlock Punish the Pacifist and one turn later Divine Scorn. Now the main battle trait, Blood Tithe. As the game and the killing progresses, we unlock more of our battle trait. Even though this sounds like we have no battle trait early on, it's a huge upside in terms of any composition and versatility. The abilities are strong. How do we unlock them? Any destroyed unit grants us a Blood Tithe point, which can be spent to unlock a new skill. But we receive the buff. Instead of once per battle round, we can now unlock a skill each turn. And here's our first major strategy warp we need to address. Also, if you play against Blades of Khorne, be aware of this. Any Age of Sigmar game peaks in damage in battle round 2. This means we as Khorne players would really struggle to perform if we do not start unlocking skills early. If we delay, we simply fall behind. So our attention looks like this. We want some action in Battle Round 1. Then we try to evade most interactions in Battle Round 2. Of course, we cannot evade the enemy, but we do not want to push forward with value units before we unlock some abilities. Believe me, there will be enough murder. Our opponent will deliver and force us to act. Then in Round 3, we normally reach at least the third row, which is already very strong. We start with Murderlust, which gives us an average of about 1.5 extra charge range. This brings the average charge to 8.5. This is huge. The biggest risk for melee armies is failing the charge, and having another way to reduce that risk is awesome. The drawback is something we can ignore. If it means our charge hits, even losing a Skull Reaper on the charge is better than failing the charge. The ability tree is self-explanatory, except for two aspects. The final abilities, +1 to hit for all units and +1 attack for our charging units, scale differently with our damage dealers. The Big Axe Bloodthirsters and the non-demon units prefer the +1 to hit. All the crit mortal units and Bloodletter variants prefer the +1 to attack. And if we fight an enemy that doesn't cast manifestations, doesn't shoot and doesn't have any weapon abilities, our battle traits suck until we reach the final abilities. In that case, we choose Glorious Combat or not, to have both later options available. We will deep dive into available playstyles during list building, but I really want to emphasize something now. Most Khorne units kind of suck on their own, with no battle traits or abilities, which is very, very, very cool. Yes, units feel a bit underwhelming, but they're not. Blades of Khorne is not like fried chicken, where you see it and you instantly want it. It's more like a fully stacked kitchen with all the equipment and ingredients you need to create almost any dish you want. And that's one of the greatest strengths of the army. As long as your force has a plan, it is a good force. We can lean into a lot of strategies and playstyles with Khorne. Let's talk rules. Battle formations. This review includes the Scourge of Ghyran rules. And even if it's not available when you watch this video, comparing them explains a lot of decisions and mechanics very well. We start with the pure demon horde, because it is only one option, Murder Host. Each demon that fought can move up to these 6 inches at the end of our turn. This ability serves 2 major purposes: getting onto objectives and, ironically, running away, but with honor. First, what does use a fight ability mean? It only means the unit has used the ability. It does not mean any dice were rolled. That is very important, because the unit can use a fight ability if it is in combat or if it has charge. This means we can charge into the enemy, wipe them, and catch objectives. That's the obvious move. The less obvious move is this. Since this will be a common theme, I will refer to such moves as Spider-Man swing. We charge a unit with 2 of our units, at least one hammer and another unit, both demons of course. Our hammer goes as close as needed. Our other unit moves half an inch in front of the enemy unit to complete the charge. The rest of its models move in a line towards the real target, objectives or positioning that creates a screening layer. Then in the combat phase, we activate the hammer and wipe the enemy. Then our second unit can use a fight ability, because it has charged. And because no enemies are in combat, we can pile in with the unit in any direction. At the end of our turn, both units get an additional d6 to reposition, either in a screening formation, or the hammer moves further away from harm, or the second unit moves onto its real target, objectives, or some requirements for battle tactics. This way, our demons get an immense level of reach. Does it work all the time? No. Not if we need more than 1 extra inch. Does it work often enough that knowing this will increase your skill? Yes, it wins games. Not all, but it matters a lot. Now a pure non-demon army. We have 2 options. +1 to hit against enemies standing near objectives that were meant to belong to us but aren't at this point, and the Scourge of Ghyran Gortide, which gives a non-demon hero and 2 non-demon units +2 movement in our movement phase. And here's the first trap. Nearly all non-demons, also known as Bloodbound, hit on force. Not complaining, but definitely judging. What in Khorne's name are they doing all day long if not honing their combat skills? Whatever. Therefore, the +1 to hit seems very good, but in reality, tabletop reality, it is a very mediocre buff. Most units that stand on objectives or near them are cheap, not very valuable units, especially with the new trend in the GHBs to punish standing on objectives. It is very rare that our opponent will place their prime units near objectives we can reach with our damage dealers. The bonus is often granted to destroy some low defense unit that holds an objective, and in those cases, +1 to hit is just overkill. But +2 movement for 3 units is just pure value, every time. Bloodbound armies run more heroes, so the requirement of a hero in range is not really an issue. You can also just run the hero into position and then activate the ability to bestow the +2 movement onto your units. And +2 movement for a mostly 5-inch force is really good. Being at the right place at the right time is about 90% of what we try to accomplish in AOS. So as long as we have the option +2 movement over sometimes +1 to hit, unless we build a very defensive force, but we will look into that later in list building. Now the mixed force options. First, Brass Stampede. This ability has so many unnecessary stipulations, which makes it very bad. It's hard to pull off and it doesn't grant any damage buff, but it brings consistency into a highly explosive build. And there's one list that wants that. That is all a battle formation needs. Now a perfect display of a good and a bad designed ability. Khornate Legion and Tournament of Skulls. Let's bash down Tournament of Skulls before we bask in Khornate glory. Why we don't choose Tournament of Skulls? You choose both units in your hero phase, but only reap the effect in the combat phase. Issue? No. What could possibly go wrong in between, right? In addition, the buff is meager, +1 to wound for 2 units. The demons either already wound on 2s or have crit mortals. And the Bloodbound can get the bonus much easier, so this ability is a pass. And now we look at this peak ability design. Khornate Legion. When do we have to decide what units use it? Right, when we get the effect. And the effect is great. Fight with 2 units, one after another, before your opponent gets to swing. Haha! Haha yourself. you weird elf. We have access to some good damage dealers on both the demon and the bloodbound side. Just be careful. You pile in with the demon first, then you choose the second unit to fight. And there's also an errata of the core rules. The unit chosen to fight immediately afterwards must be either in combat or have charged. Bummer, no Spider-Man swings here. The ability also has a dope name and is absolutely a reason to run a mixed force. A Thirster followed by a reinforced unit of Skull Reapers just bring the pain. Now the enhancement section. Heroic traits. Not gonna lie, Magical Scorn and Skull Collector are just a joke compared to Frenzied Taskmaster. Unless your army has no infantry or cavalry, it's Frenzied Taskmaster. Frenzied Taskmaster is really good, and even useful to fuel our Blood Tide in a clutch situation when we desperately need a Blood Tide point. Else it's Magical Scorn. The -1 to chant and cast for enemies within 12 inches is very limited, but most debuffs have a range of 12 inches, which could make a difference. And we should forget Skull Collector. It's a trap and will nearly never happen, and certainly not multiple times, which isn't fun, and that skill tries to be fun. Our artifacts provide a little more of a choice. Color of Contempt is good. We have surprisingly little defense against plain casting, and some lists simply have no Thirster in them. Shocking, right? Which are the best holders for Argoth, the King of Blades. Argoth is very good on all Bloodthirsters. Of course, the quality of damage of the individual Bloodthirsters differs very starkly. In short, a Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, the one with the anti-hero and the flail, with Argoth deals immense damage against heroes. Between its attacks, rampage and shooting, it deals about 23 damage to a 4+ save hero, close to 20 damage against a 3+ save hero. Even if the hero has a 2-up save because of buffs, it still pushes 16 damage through, which is great. Elven god great, if you know what I mean. The Insensate Rage Thirster is also a great wielder of the anti-ward weapon, and sometimes ramming an infantry hero with no ward is enough to kill them. Butcher's Blade, on the other hand, is again a trap. It does not work with the outrageous carnage ability of the Big Axe Thirster, because it says allocated combat damage, and the mortals are inflicted by the ability. So that one is a skip. Prayer lore. We can choose between the book lore and the Scourge lore, but since the book lore is much better, we pick it every single time. Giving a unit the buff of our Blood Range battle trait with the uncontrollable Rage Prayer is really good, especially since our units often lack high damage. The worse the unit starts out, the bigger the relative gain. The lowest still worth increase is on an Insensate Rage Bloodthirster, because its Giant Axe only goes from damage 5 to 6, which is only a 20% increase. It's only really wasted on else unbuffed Blood Crushers. For the rest of our damage dealers, the benefit is greater, all enough to consider it a strong buff. The downside of the ability can be ignored. We buff, we charge, and we use all-out attack. No save bonus is added to our unit anyway. But there is another prayer I value even higher, much higher. It's Final Act of Violence. Whenever a model dies in combat, it deals a mortal wound back on a roll of 5+. And if you hit the better version, you roll 2 dice for each of your killed models. The ability is so good it wins games. It enables heavy prayer builds and it warps the balance of the entire tome. Let's understand the core concept of the game. There's no such thing as too much damage, but there is such a thing as too much tankiness. What I mean is this. Some units in the game wipe whatever they touch, and those units are just good. We talk Varangard, Chosen, Iron Guts, Annihilators, buff Dawn Riders, or take your pick. And trying to withstand their onslaught and survive just doesn't work. Blood Warriors with their conditional 5-up ward are about the tankiest thing we have, and they have their place, but even they are not really tanky. Charged by a unit of Varangard, they get wiped. Sure, they take 1 down, but still, not more than 1 or 2 Blood Warriors survive, and they might even be powered through off the table. But what if we add a buffed up version of the prayer? Every dead Blood Warrior deals some mortal damage back. The entire situation flips on its head. The first blow of Varangard, they can attack twice, 10 dead Blood Warriors. But no, before the Blood Warriors attack back and deal 8 to 9 damage, we get to roll 20 dice to inflict about 6 to 7 mortal damage back. Combine both and we end up killing about 3 Varangard, which then means they will not even wipe the unit. And even if they do, they somehow manage to lose half their unit in their own turn. And that's the whole point of the ability. It's not tankiness, it's stopping the enemy onslaught. And losing half a unit will definitely stop the enemy onslaught. Let's go a step further. Replace the 20 Blood Warriors with 20 Blood Reavers. Now look at both situations. The normal version and the buffed up version of the prayer. In both situations, the Varangard just wipe our unit in their first fight. But normal version, 20 dice. Mortals on 5-up. Average of 6.66 damage. Or 1 dead Varangard. Buffed up version, 40 dice. 13.3 damage. About 2 dead Varangard. Yes, of course. Not all Blood Reavers get to roll their dice, because they won't all be in combat. So let's reduce it to 1 dead Vanguard and 2 dead if it's the buffed up version. Still absurd, because we are talking about losing a 160 point unit, and dealing that amount of damage in the enemy turn, in addition to blocking the enemy, is just the true definition of durability, because we stop their advance. There is no way the enemy can trade against this kind of ability. So yes, Battletome Prayer Lore is the better choice, especially if you run high model units. We have no choice in Manifestation Lore, except maybe to skip it. A very, very seldom used lore. Sometimes an axe or a sigil to block a path, nothing special at all, but it's free. Then again, it takes up space in my miniature suitcase, so I often leave the skulls at home. If you think about starting the faction and you want to do it on a budget, skip buying the manifestations. Warscroll time. I will throw every Warscroll on the screen, explain its role and purpose, and place it into a category. And also some comments on the points, so this review will stay useful even after points change. Since none of our infantry heroes deal significant damage, they are all utility, and we group them into 2 categories, priests and non-priests. First, we talk about utility heroes that can mount our faction terrain, the Skull Altar. It's bonkers good when someone is on top, and does nothing if not. And it allows another useful Spider-Man swing. Like most, if not all terrain features, it is mounted in the hero phase, and its Ascent ability has 3-inch reach. Combine that with the fact that you can deploy it anywhere on your deployment zone, unlike your units, which normally must stay more than 9 inches away from the enemy zone. This means we can place a priest within 3 inches, use the ability and extend our reach even further. Useful to know. Not game breaking, but often really good. Another really good use is its purpose as a distraction. It is really good, and your opponent knows it. You can place it in front of your force, reachable for the enemy, to make them attack it. Even shooting it, if you can either calculate it might survive, or if your opponent has a lot of shooting, take some of the weight of your other units, which are more valuable than the terrain piece. Your opponent has to kill it to remove its worth. A 1 health remaining altar is still a fully functioning altar. Your army works totally fine without it. Luring the enemy in can be our advantage. Just be careful your opponent doesn't use it as an entry to pile in into your forces. So we look at infantry heroes differently. We want 1 priest to ascend the altar, nearly always, because that priest is just pure value. These are our fitting priest options: Bloodmaster, Realmgore Ritualist, Slaughter Priest. While it is a bit of a non-brainer when we choose the Herald of Khorne, the leader of a pure demon regiment, the choice between the other 2 priests is a bit trickier. The Slaughter Priest provides an additional unbind, and the Blood Sacrifice ability is very strong. It also works against the enemy while he stands on top of the altar. But the Realmgore's buff is just plus 25% damage for our main damage dealers, and it works on cavalry, which we will see is not always the case. The riders, not the mounts, never the mounts. She can also just bleed on the altar itself to grant her 12-inch aura. It's not optimal, but sometimes it's sufficient. If you only want 1 infantry priest and you do not run a heavy skullcrusher force, it's Slaughter Priest over Realmgore Ritualist. If you run 2 priests in your Bloodbound army, run both. Realmgore and Slaughter Priest for 130 are both good. Honestly, it's really hard to say with wizards and priests that are that low priced, because we are talking only about a single instance of that hero. Now we compare the value of the Herald on foot to the one on the Blood Throne. Herald on Throne deals more damage, but since we are not talking about hardcore damage dealers, that advantage does not matter. It also has more movement, which does matter, but the base is much bigger, so it will not always fit in all the places and can be easier to shot because it's not infantry. The ward is weirdly good. It lets you risk some combats you would normally avoid, but it's a small minor buff. Now the real meat of the decision. Is the deal 3 damage to a friendly unit ability worth the loss of the altar option and the extra 40 points? Well, no, it is not. If you run 1 demon priest, choose the Foot Herald. If you run multiple, choose 1 on Blood Throne. The infantry herald is fine at 120 points, but since they're all regiment leaders, I hope to see a slight points drop, maybe 10 points. The herald on Blood Throne could just drop from 160 down to 130 to match its worth. The non-priest utility heroes. Mighty Lord of Khorne, Battletome version. Good unit, nice buff for our Bloodbound infantry. And he's the only hero that can bring Bloodbound non-priests with his regiment. But be careful, it's most of the time better to bring those heroes in individual regiments and save the points to bring more non-hero units. Also, the Strike First ability for another hero often has no real good target. And even if it has one, he's about 30 points too expensive, because it buff competes with the Realmgore at a very reasonable 120 points. Mighty Lord of Khorne, Scourge of Ghyran version. More damage, more fun abilities. Both abilities are good. Tricky and difficult to pull off, but good. But here's the issue. 170 points is just way too high. 120 and he's good. The Battletome version is the more consistent one, and this one is the more explosive one. We proceed with the heroes mighty lords of Khorne can bring with their regiments. Our wannabe melee duelist, the Deathbringer. They had their hot minute in the spotlight, but thanks to poor rules design, they got ruined. It's a good unit. Damage is good. Both abilities are useful. Careful, the anti-command ability has an errata. In short, one use per command. Makes sense. Thank you, Games Workshop, for giving us logical rules. But definitely thank you for that army of renown. More on that later. For now we can acknowledge that the Deathbringer is very much overpriced at 130 points in the normal army. It should cost about 90 to 100 points, but it will never drop that low because of the army of renown. The Bloodsecrator. If you play Bloodbound and you want damage, then he's in. The rally bonus is better than in other armies, because we can combo it with self-damaging abilities like the ones from our priests and then restore our model in front of our unit. Careful, every added model must be in currency with an already existing model. And it's not the smallest reach we gain. The models have to be in currency, but another 32, 40 or even 90mm base is a very good movement bonus. Bringing back one Reaver or Blood Warrior is almost guaranteed with the enhanced rally. And even a 5 health Blood Crusher returns in about 2 out of 3 times. The bigger obstacle would be actually killing one in our own hero phase. The right timing for the +1 attack buff is normally the moment you get any value. You charge the first valuable unit and you're unsure to destroy it, pop it for certainty. It is better to destroy an enemy up front than to maximize output but be too late. Before we continue to the best hero in this book, we have a look at the coolest, the Skullgrinder, another victim of the Army of Renown balance issue. But first, the ability got an errata. We don't compare our roll to the control score, but to the control characteristic of the attacked unit, which means it's only good against monsters and other high control characteristic units. Versus 1 control, it's the same as needing a 6. Versus control 2, it's the same as needing a 5 up. A slight upside. This ability doesn't fail on any specific roll. An enemy with the control characteristic of 6 or higher will have strike last for sure. The +1 rend ability is a nice bonus. Nothing special, but the synergy is worth consideration. If you run him alongside the Battletome Mighty Lord of Khorne, the Lord provides him first strike, and then he might dish out strike last. At 110 points, he's a bit expensive. Drop him down to 100 again, or even 90, and he's very viable. Now the best Bloodbound hero in this book. The Bloodstoker. Ignore his stats, they suck. Ignore his damage, it sucks even more. But he brings the speed, and we want that. No rolling, no risking. You want the ability, just bring him into range. You can run him, give a unit run and charge, give them +2 move from the battle formation, move them extra d6 inches with the heroic trait Frenzy Taskmaster and use at the double. Suddenly a move 5 unit moves around 16.5 inches. At the average Murderlust charge of 8.5 inches and we have a 25.5 average threat range around our slowpoke units. Even without the +2 inches, it's still 23.5 inches. The additional half an inch is the slack distance we get for a successful charge. And if we take Skull Crushers, we can extend that range to about 30 inch. And that's what I meant earlier. That movement is insane. It has a cost, yes, multiple even, but there is only very little dice rolling involved. Nothing really fails. That's value in it of itself. The possibility to be that fast with a hammer unit warps our enemy strategies a lot. 100 points, perfect. But his value is still good, or rather necessary, even at 120 points. But still, 100 points is perfect. Did you hear Mad Rose? Perfect at 100 points. Do not touch them. 3 heroes which might get a last hooray. Lord of Khorne Juggernaut. Does nothing special. 200 points are just too much. 120 and he would be playable. Scar Bloodwrath. Place him between Slaughter Priests and Blood Throne. Kill him in turn 1 and you will have a not so bad trick. Then again, 140 points are just 20 too much. Skullmaster. Herald of Khorne on Juggernaut. This one for 130 points is actually good. Maybe 10 points too much, but who cares. The buff is just very good. His only downside is his bad regiment options, but we'll build a list with him later. Also not sure why we associate Bloodletters to be male. They clearly lack any need to wear any loincloth. Except for the Herald on foot.
He's the only dog who's good enough to wear pants!
Now a rare specimen. A Khorne hero that can actually join multiple regiments. Skulltaker. He can basically join every other demon regiment. He deals more damage, is more durable and has a higher control score than Fleshhounds. But he's far worse as a screen. Why is that important? Because that is always the consideration with him. Skulltaker or Fleshhounds. For me, as long as his points are not on the same level, it is dogs. He combos a bit if we play him with the Khornate Legion, where we could activate him with strike first against an enemy hero, and if no other unit eligible to fight has strike first, we can pick another unit to fight. It is really not happening that often, but something to remember. Our final non-monster hero, Karanak, the three-headed menace. His ability has some errata, as you can see on screen. In short, pick up to one flesh-out unit and remove it and Karanak from the battlefield. Drop Karanak somewhere else. Then the hounds hold you within 12 inch of him. Place everything 9 inch from every unit, but Karanak can be as close as more than 6 inch away from his quarry. It's a teleport, tactic scorer and objective snatching ability. On some missions you can even snatch 2 objectives at once. Its edge case okay for 110 points. It could drop a bit to 100 or even 90. Or maybe the dogs can go down to... I'm not gonna spoil such an intriguing information. Monster time! And Khorne has the coolest monsters ever. Despite other not that objective opinions, Bloodthirsters are the coolest, the best, the mightiest, the most. We start with the Unfettered Fury. Why? Because they are very redundant. They increase the chances to land a charge, but we already have enough of that with Murderlust. He's good versus monsters, and monsters are not that common, or just heroes in addition, which makes the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster much better against them. 390 points are just too much. For 330, I would consider them in regular lists. Else he's a tax in our army of renown. Speaking of which, Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster. Highest rank among the Thirsters, and it shows. His ability to give any one visible demon unit +1 to attack is already very good, but his value as a hero hunter is nearly equally important. His points are spot on, but any increase, up to maybe even 450, would still make him playable. A rare incidence in which an army of renown stabilizes the point balance instead of wrecking it. They're auto-include if you run demons, but believe me, they're so fun to play, especially if you do some sound whenever you use their rampage. Vengeance of Khorne. Finally, our big damage dealers. We compare the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage with Skarbrand, a demon that stands out as especially angry among a horde of the angriest in the mortal realms. How do we evaluate which one we want, and when to take them over the non-monster units? The latter is answered very clearly. We choose Skarbrand or the Big Axe Thirster when we do not plan to bring a Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, or we need a demon hammer that is faster than Bloodletters. But which one? Damage-wise, Skarbrand deals more damage against all targets except infantry. No real surprise there. So the question is more about what type of other units we bring to deal damage. If we have a high amount of reinforced hammers that can deal enough damage, we choose the Insensate Rage Thirster, because in that case we can send him against enemy infantry and let the others handle the non-infantry. But if we play just 2 big hammers, a monster and a reinforced unit, let's say Skull Reapers, I go for Skarbrand more often, because then we are forced to just deal with the enemy as they come. Another aspect is the overall effectiveness, and here's where Skarbrand currently falls short. While the Insensate Rage Thirster is about spot on with 410 points, Skarbrand is too expensive at 410 points. He should be more around 400. Actually, all Thirsters should be 400, except the Unfettered Fury at 330 or 350. Another advantage of the 12-inch flying Thirster is, well, 12-inch flying. Power through is just very strong with a profile like that. Combine it with the D6 move at the end of turn, and the giant red demon is flapping all over the battlefield. Both Skarbrand and the Thirster have similar roles. They are our damage dealers. Even their threat range is similar. It comes down to your choice of playstyle. Skarbrand is better in your opponent's turn. The Insensate Rage Thirster is better during your turn. We'll look closely at their rivalry in list building. Now our non-hero units. We assign labels to our units. Screens, cheap units that are meant to be a roadblock for our opponents. Utility units, units with a specific role. And 3 categories of damage dealers. True hammers, which have the highest damage. Fast damage dealers, faster than our through hammers, but less damage. Assassins, even faster but less impactful and smaller in points and hopefully footprint. Our Bloodthirsters already enter the fast hammer category. Let's add some more units to that. For all multi-model demons, I assume we added the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster to the list, because that is 100% what we will do if we run those units. Bloodcrusher, Scourge of Ghyran. Reinforced as fast hammer. They're just very good at surprising the enemy, because you guessed it, they're Spider-Man swing. Their ability states that they have to end in combat, but not with the unit they charged. But since the ability only triggers on a 3-up, we play it a bit more carefully. Make sure most, maybe even all Blood Crushers can attack the charged unit after their pile-in move if the ability fails. 160 points is good. Any higher and they fail the efficiency check. Blood Crushers, Battletome version. These are tricky. Their damage is lower on the charge and their ability is less consistent. But they synergize very well with the Herald on Juggernaut. As long as that unit is viable, they are fine. Else they really need like 10 or 20 points reduction to at least dip into efficiency. With the Herald they are reinforced a fast hammer. Without him, a utility unit that tries to stun some enemy cavalry. Sounds bad, but between Murderlust and Bloodtide, our units have a bit more slack to do their thing or to feed in our skill tree. Now we compare Bloodletters with Skull Reapers to finally find out which one is the better hammer and whether or not you should even look at Demons or Bloodbound in the first place. Yes. No. Let's do something less stupid. We evaluate them in context. That sounds fun too. Skull Reapers deal more damage without support. The moment we add in the attack buff of our Bloodthirster, the damage evens out. But then again, with buffs both perform well. Bloodbound units are just more explosive. Run and charge and the bonus movement make them the faster option. So it is Demon for consistency, Bloodbound for higher peaks. What about our other hammer options? The ones with more armor on them. Blood Warriors and Skull Crushers. At a glance, Blood Warriors seem to be our tanks, but they are not. They are our second fighting unit, because their role is not to endure incoming damage. No punishing mechanic. There are only 3 ways they can obtain their 5-up ward. You charge onto an objective controlled by your opponent. You are already on an objective and fail to seize control of it last turn. You redeploy it onto an objective you do not control. And while the third move is certainly good to surprise an opponent, it is very cost heavy, especially if you plan to all-out defense afterwards as well. Also, failing to seize an objective should not be our plan or even part of it, which leaves us with one favorable role. They charge an enemy on or around an objective under the enemy's or no one's control, because that's their role. We go in with some more damagey unit or units, like Bloodletters, Skull Reapers, Bloodthirsters. Activate the damage dealer to wipe the target. Then the enemy activates the unit our Blood Warriors are in combat with. We all out defense. Combine it with the 5-up ward, they will not be damaged that much and capable of striking back very efficiently. So their role is to be an additional aggressive unit. At 200 points, a bit overpriced, but only like 10 or at most 20 points. So unless you plan on running super heavy warrior builds, it doesn't really matter. Now the heaviest of heavy metal cavalry there is. Mighty Skull Crushers. They are the embodiment of what this tome is about. Context. Thought I said bloodshed. This unit is a big pile of letdown. No real damage, bad footprint, average movement, low health. But they suddenly rush 30-inch across the board and end units on their own. Enable all sort of strategies and are just unkillable. So let's talk about when we add Mighty Skull Crushers to our list. When we want a speeding unit and have little but not zero priest presence in our Bloodbound force. Here are the top picks of every Bloodbound army. Frenzied Taskmaster, Bloodstoker, Slaughter Priest, Realm Gore Ritualist, Goretide. All of them synergize very well with the Mighty Skull Crushers. Their main weapons have no crit ability, so the crit mortal sprayer increase their damage a lot. Careful, their companion weapons do not have the Blood Hungry keyword. Increasing their movement from 10 to 12 plus 2d6 or even 18 plus d6 for a command, and a charge that is above 8.5 on average is very strong. They're just fast. We position them on either side, not perfectly in the middle, because that way we maximize their tankiness. Then we charge into the enemy flanks, hopefully with crit mortals and maybe even +1 to wound. They deal some damage. Of course, they're not wiping units with high armor, but units on a 4-up or worse will struggle to withstand them. And their high health characteristic makes them a very good choice for power back. Through. At 200 points they could just drop another 10 points, but it's the same as Blood Warriors. A reinforced unit is very fine as a fast hammer. Now we enter the cheap zone. Units that can act as dedicated screens. Blood Reavers, Claws of Karanak and Fleshhounds. First, their screening range. Fleshhounds 60mm plus the gaps. Ends up at 350mm. About 14 inches. Blood Reavers, same logic, about 300mm. About 12 inches. Claws of Karanak, same logic, very oddly positioned, 270mm. A bit over 10 inches. For the Claws and Reavers, the numbers can be stretched if we place them in a way where we lose one model to currency if we take casualties, which I very often just do, because it helps with tight screening. There is no question, if we are looking for a cheap screen and we cannot fit a 100-point unit, it's Reavers. Actually, I start all lists with 3x80 on my calculator. Yes, I build lists with a calculator. They look like this. It's more fluid and faster than the app, also more fun, for me. Now we talk a little bit about their special use cases. Claws of Karanak get crits on unmodified 5-ups if Fleshhounds are around. So giving them crit mortals with the prayer and using them as very fast suicide unit is pretty effective. They are in the enemy's face if we want. Move them pre-game 6 inches. Maybe cut down some with the priest. Take the 60mm base model, rally them back. These 2 steps are very optional. Pray crit mortals on them, then give them maybe run and charge. Move them with Taskmaster and they will be in the enemy screen in turn 1. Run some flash hounds onto an objective or teleport them and they will deal enough damage to destroy a 10 health 3-up safe unit with all-out attack. A very good way to start the game. It's worth noting that flash hounds get +1 rend from the uncontrollable rage prayer or our battle trait. But aside from that, those lion-sized demon dogs are pretty much a slightly faster demon unit. At 100 points they're about right, maybe a 10-point drop off for better external balance. Blood Reavers on the other hand, they are worth talking about. At 80 points they are hyper efficient. If we reinforce them, they outvalue Skull Reapers in every point. The only situation in which Skull Reapers are better is against low rend, low damage units, but otherwise the Reavers outshine them. They also benefit the most from the crit mortals prayer, and even more importantly from the mortal damage on death prayer. Remember, all the movement tricks and buffs, now apply them. Crit mortals and the mortal damage on death prayer on them, and those little menaces wreck enemy reinforced hammers with ease out of nowhere. Against 3-up safe units they deal about 25 damage. Of course, more than half of that comes from dying, but guess what? We play Khorne. The skull do I care from where the blood flows. Okay, let's cool down a bit. Give me a moment. Wrathmongers. Easy evaluation. If we play some fighty bloodbound, we pack 1 unit of them. If we play heavy bloodbound, we pack 2. Unless we play a kind of army that just slings 1 single bloodbound unit forward, then we can skip them. At 130 points, they're spot on. Are they unplayable if they go up? No. Should they go down? Not really. Maybe for external balance again. Before we enter list building, I want to ask you for a minute of silent grief. It tears my heart to talk about them. Kog'Araths and Skull Cannons. Why in the world of destruction are they so badly designed? Especially the Kog'Arath. If only I didn't give its weapon profile the companion ability. I mean, whose companion is that thing anyway? 120 points for that thing are just too much. Like they are now, 100 points is maybe too much. But the best buff would be to remove its companion ability. Just imagine the coolness. They are bloodbound monsters. And while they really suck in combat, they would get 2 of the 3 buffs out of our battle trait. The crit mortals because they are bloodbound and the +1 damage because they are monsters. But who cares anyway? Well, I do! Skull Cannons, our final unit. The unit isn't even that bad, just horribly overpriced. I get it, Games Workshop, we want shooting to be bad, but for what we get at 140 points, it's just a joke. It needs points that are high enough for it to not be spammed. But 120 at most, maybe even 110. After all, it deals nearly no damage at all and only 15-inch range. Now we talk list building. We'll go through several examples of each type of list we can build with Blades of Khorne. Let's start with the most common and overall strongest one, Counter-Strike. Low drop defensive setup, waits for the opponent to commit, then crushes back with their hammer units. I covered that type in an entire video. Have a look if you are more interested in the exact mechanics and thought process. We built a demon, a bloodbound and a mixed force. Understand their strengths and weaknesses. Let's start with the demons. 3 damage dealers, at least one of them a fast hammer, 2x20 blood ladders, 6 Scourge of Jiran blood crushers. And since we play demons, we add in the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster with Argath, King of Blades and Friend's Taskmaster. We now have to decide whether we want pure demons to maximize our battle trait, Murder Host. In that case we add in a Herald on foot and 3 packs of Flesh Hounds. We are at 1780 points. Now we want a unit for an early kamikaze. As long as the Scourge of Jiran blood crushers are available, we choose a non-reinforced unit of them and end up at 1940 points. Considerable modifications. If we want some variation or the Scourge of Jiran blood crushers rotate out, the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster has a very good regiment option. Everything and another Bloodthirster as a sidekick. So let's use that option. Wrath of Khorne Thirster, Insensate Rage Thirster, 2x20 blood ladders, 5 Flesh Hounds, a Herald and 3 packs of Hounds for a total of 1970 points. Put Skulltaker in for a unit of Hounds. The Herald and the Flesh Hounds aren't the best option. We change the second regiment entirely. Slaughter Priest, 3 Claws of Karanak, 4 Blood Reavers, 2000 points. This way we have more variation in points. We can use the first turn kamikaze of the claws to farm some blood tithe and bring out the prayers more consistently. The final act of violence, you remember, mortal damage on death, is pretty nice with blood ladders because their pre-fight movement ensures all of them get into combat even if they are charged and our opponent tries to play it smart. This army plays like this. Turn 1. We want to go in with a small unit. Unless your opponent underestimates our thirster, we try to shift our army a bit around the map so we do not open gaps. The trick is to know sequencing. Send in a small unit first, or if you can guarantee the unit can power through, send in the crushers or the big X thirster. Power through and D6 move away after they fight, but move away from your army. That way the gap between our sent-in unit and the enemy widens more. And if your opponent decides to chase that unit, it drives some of their attention away from our main force. Then we want the Bloodletters to engage. And after some killing, our Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster goes for the hero hunting. Try to save your prayer points to always pray the final act of violence on the more exposed Bloodletters. More exposed in a sense that they are more likely to be targeted by your opponent. The biggest drawback of this army is raw damage. Even though the overall damage is high, it's a bit spread out. This list lacks a 500 point wreck your face hammer, so we try to play it a bit slower to get some of our blood type buffs before we go in. Now the Bloodbound version of a Counter-Strike list. 3 units of Blood Reavers, 2 reinforced units of Skull Reapers, 1 reinforced unit of Blood Warriors. We add in a Blood Stoker, and since our plan is to attack with multiple units, we add in a Blood Secretor. 1560 points. And our core is done. Now we start to tweak. We add in a Slaughter Priest for our altar, and 2 units of Wrathmongers. Then maybe fuse 2 units of 10 Blood Reavers into a 20 model unit to have some damage unit for a Kamikaze mission. With the Priest on top of the altar and his Blood Sacrifice, they get crit mortals pretty consistent. Color of contempt for any hero but the Slaughter Priest, because the Unbind will not stack with his innate ability to unbind. And Frenzied Taskmaster for our Blood Stoker. Just make sure to first give a unit run and charge, then move them d6 inches. Goretide for +2 movement or Tireless Conquerors for the +1 to hit. This force plays a bit more aggressive. We try to position our Skull Reapers to each side, behind the screen, and try to engage their enemy at their side. Always their side. Why always their side? Because that is where it is the hardest to reach after they destroyed something. The enemy army is sometimes blocking itself from reaching them. And even if they do, they had to go to the side with a portion of their force, which creates openings. First we send in the reinforced Blood Reavers to deal our initial damage, to destroy a unit early. Just try to evade counter charges so we do not pull our enemies further towards our army. Then when it's go time, we buff our main units and send in the Reapers and Blood Warriors. Also try to go in with the Wrathmongers, even if they would die. We want their +1 attack at least once. Pop the Blood Secretor's +1 attack and that turn is yours. The Demon Bloodbound mix of a Counter-Strike force is my favorite. Higher damage and the Bloodthirster are just my type of army. It is a bit riskier to mix the force, but you get a lot of advantages. Just like going more damage and speed by stripping the armor. First either Scarbrand or Insensate Raged Thirster. Then 2 reinforced Skull Reapers, a Bloodstalker and 3 Reaver units. 1470 points, the standing core. Now we add in some more damage buffs. A unit of Wrathmongers and a Blood Secretor. That way we can get the +1 attack if the enemy charged and when we go far with our Skull Reapers. Now we add in our Altar Priest and a pack of Fleshhounds. 1950 points for the extra command point. Upgrade Reaver units into Claws of Karnak for a better first turn charge unit. With this list we can actually play the second round of the game pretty well. The only thing in our way are the enemy screens. How does our plan look like? Early on, clear the screens on the table. Then run and charge plus Taskmaster a unit of Reapers and the Thirster into the enemy's force. Activate the Secretor's buff and try to bring in the Wrathmongers too, if possible. In that turn, try to give the Skull Reapers crit mortals. The main goal is to engage the enemy's main force with our main damage dealers. And between all the buffs and the sheer speed, it is very much possible to sack the game in an early round, even with no real blood type buffs. Just be sure to charge with the Bloodthirster, you guessed it, a bit from the side. Have the Skull Reapers be the first enemy target, because in that list Thirster is extra valuable. It is basically the holder of our formation ability. Next list type, Slingshot. Uses a web of buff pieces to supercharge a few fast units that punch way above their weight. The key to a good Slingshot list is the balance between buff pieces and units to buff. But there is one very often forgotten element in those kind of lists. A unit that can fight without buffs. There is no demon version of that list. So let's gather our buff pieces. Speed, Bloodstalker. Damage, Blood Secretor. Prayers, Slaughter Priest. More damage, more prayers, Realmgore Ritualists. Okay, we're at 4 buff pieces. Now the units. 4 times 20 Reavers. Horde mode activated. 10 Skull Reapers. 1470 points. The core of our Slingshot stands. Now some screens, 3x10 Blood Reavers and a unit of Wrathmongers. Finally, we want even more prayers, so we add in another Slaughter Priest. We could also cut 2 Reaver units for another Wrathmonger unit, and upgrade the Slaughter Priest to a Herald on Blood Throne. In any case, we either take the +2 movement or the +1 hit formation. How does this list play? Well, we hurt any of our units to stack up on ritual points. Buff a reinforced unit of Reavers with both the mortal damage prayers and sling them in with at the double. They can reach about 26 inches across the battlefield. If you roll only once on all your dice, even with the reroll, they still got 17 inches, but they can max out at 31 inch threat range. We packed 4 potential hammers, but of course the 160 point units will sometimes act as screens. Just be sure to have some ritual points ready to give them the final act of violence for some mortal damage kickback. This list also is a pain to move, and I had to proc half of the Blood Reavers to test it because I only got 50. Now we build some sort of alpha block, fast and tough, rushes the board, endures the onslaught and stops the enemy from scoring. It's certainly more an alpha block list, but with an added element of damage. Why? Because we still want to build up Blood Tide and take advantage of cramped enemies. For that we start differently, in a way that makes me already uncomfortable. We do not add any Reavers at the beginning, instead a reinforced unit of Mighty Skull Crushers, a Bloodstalker, a Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage and a Slaughter Priest. Our formation is Khornate Legion. This is our alpha part. Let's understand this before we continue. Against any kind of blocking strategy, the counter strategy is to arrange your units in a way a lot of your units end up in combat with the blockers in a way they can all fight. That way, your units are not stuck in your deployment zone and can fight themselves out very quickly. The worst case is to have some units caught by the enemy and your other units are stuck behind them because you cannot move the units in front of them out of combat. So the normal way to go against any alpha blocking list is to condense the units, put them base to base and up front. That is when the Thirster comes into place. Both his area of effect ability, Outrageous Carnage, and the fact that we can tag an enemy screen and then power through back into safety benefit a lot from that condensing of our opponent. Now we add in more units. The plan is to have an initial crippling blow and then have the game unfold a bit slower since the enemy didn't move out of their deployment zone early. We will have 2 options. First the Herald on Juggernaut and the Battletome Blood Crushers, plus 10 Skull Reapers, also a unit of Fleshhounds and a Reaver unit, for a total of 1990 points. The Realmgore Ritualist can provide additional damage for the Mighty Skull Crushers, even in turn 1. The Herald and the Blood Crushers deal very good damage, once per battle, but that's enough. Turn 1, everything rushes forward. The Mighty Skull Crushers and the Thirster fight. Your opponent retaliates. And then we bring the next wave of hurt in form of pumped Blood Crushers and Skull Reapers. If the Herald is Legends and not available anymore, our second half looks pretty much the same but with Scarbrand instead, conveniently the same amount of points. Are there any traps in Blades of Khorne list building and gameplay? Well, yes, like in all list building, a lot. Let's address them. First trap is to focus on tankiness. Our army is made of paper. Exploding paper at best. Mighty Skull Crushers are no exception. Their tankiness is that they strike the enemy first. The 2-up save only feeds into that. Second trap is rushing in too soon. We can sometimes risk it for the biscuit, but normally we do not want that. Have some cheaper fast hammers or assassin units ready to farm some Blood Tide, but do not rush. Third trap is waiting too long. Yes, somehow the opposite is true too. We play a melee damage faction with no recursion. Striking value targets first is always our game plan. Fourth trap is to undervaluing speed and mobility. Our lists must have pressure. At no point of the game should our opponent feel safe. Every list needs some I reach across the table into your face element. Fifth trap, and I hate when people say otherwise. Not enjoying the game in an absurd manner. Scream our slogans as often as you can. Heck, it's Khorne. There is no greater joy on the table than that. Before we discuss the armies of renown, let's have an overview on the Demons, Bloodbound and Mixed Forces. Demon forces are more consistent but less explosive, both in damage and speed, except the Big Axe Thruster. Bloodletters themselves are kind of a lackluster, and if we run the numbers and consider the actual damage output in the game, they are really not that great, except with the Wrath of Khorne, +1 attack buff. Of course the damage is nice, but even better is the point distribution on one buff piece instead of all our damage dealers. The greatest strength of a demon list that runs Bloodletter variants and the Wrath of Khorne Thruster is that our hammers are really cheap and still effective. 20 blood letters for 320 points with the +1 attack. Hit like a 450 point unit, while losing them only costs us, well, 320 points, all feeding into their consistency. Bloodbound builds can be very explosive, both in damage and speed. Bringing the Bloodstalker for speed is pretty much a given. In a pure Bloodbound list, Blood Warriors and Skull Reapers complement each other, especially when running a Blood Secretor to maximize a single turn. Speaking of which, Wrathmonger are our default buff piece, but a Blood Secretor is better for offensive builds, because the board-wide range. Demon Bloodbound mix, the highest damage output, but very fragile. Also, do not try to mitigate that weakness, just lean into its strength. Damage. For all lists, our Skull Altar is just too strong to miss out. Bring an Infantry Priest. Even for Demon Force, consider starting the list building with a Slaughter Priest and 3 Reavers or Claws of Karnak. As long as there is a bonus for going high regiments, like in the current GHB 25-26 with the priority roll, Khorne can go high drops because we want to run a higher number of screens and other small units anyway. We got the armies of renown left, and they are a fun topic, for different reasons. We start with the Gore Chosen Champions, heavily nerfed and rightfully so. Also nerfed in the wrong way, but that's another topic. Play our heroes, deal damage, have fun. Well, the fun part is a bit low, because you basically just hope to roll 5 ups. This is where Games Workshop has failed us. Instead of giving us a cool Heroes of Slaughter army, we got a half-baked game mechanic and a very spammy army. It's basically as much Deathbringers as you can fit in, plus 3 priests. But the other army, the Thirster one, turned out pretty cool. Though it's a bit stiff in list building, it's 1 Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, 2 Incensed Rage Bloodthirsters and 2 Unfettered Fury ones. The list itself is good and even fun. And finally, I really want to say, blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. Khorne out.